Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey back in time, all the way to the Ming Dynasty. Now, I know what you're thinking, Ming Dynasty. That sounds potentially fascinating, but also, perhaps, a little too much like a history lesson I'm supposed to pay attention to. Well, you're not wrong. We're going to dive deep into something truly sleep-inducing. We're talking about the forgotten toiletries of the Ming Dynasty. Imagine, if you will, the gentle flickering lamplight in a nobleman's chambers, the rustle of silk as he prepares for bed, and then the scent of meticulously prepared tooth powder, or, perhaps, the slightly less appealing aroma of a centuries-old attempt at deodorant. You'll be picturing yourself right there, probably trying to hold your breath, as we explore the intimate, often bizarre, and frankly, sometimes hilarious world of personal hygiene from over 600 years ago. You probably won't survive this, not because it's dangerous, but because it's designed to lull you into the deepest, most tranquil slumber. Seriously, try to stay awake. I dare you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere particularly interesting, or it's an ungodly hour where you are, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fun to see where everyone is drifting off. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you begin to settle in, picture yourself not in your cozy bed, but transported. You're standing in the bustling, vibrant capital of Nanjing, then later, Beijing. During the Ming Dynasty, the air hums with the distant sounds of street vendors, the clatter of carts, and the murmur of thousands of lives unfolding. But our focus isn't on the grand imperial palaces or the bustling markets today. No, we're narrowing our gaze, drawing closer to the intimate spaces, the private chambers, and the very bodies of the people who lived and breathed in this astonishing era. The imperial court, you see, was the ultimate trendsetter, even for something as mundane as personal hygiene. When the emperor himself demanded a certain level of cleanliness, or a particular fragrance, you can bet your bottom dollar, or rather, your ancient Chinese coin, that the ripple effect was felt throughout the elite, and eventually, in modified forms, down to the common folk. This wasn't just about smelling nice. It was about status, about health, and frankly, about avoiding unpleasantries in close quarters. Imagine the sheer scale of the imperial household. Hundreds, sometimes thousands, of people lived and worked within those palace walls. Keeping such a populace clean, or at least acceptably fragrant, was a logistical marvel in itself. From the lowliest eunuch to the highest concubine, everyone had some form of interaction with personal care items. But what did that even mean back then? It certainly wasn't a quick trip to the corner store for a bar of triple-milled lavender soap and a tube of fluoride toothpaste. Oh no. This was an artisanal, often labor-intensive, and sometimes incredibly strange process. You're talking about a world where ingredients were sourced from nature, often with great difficulty, and concocted in ways that would make a modern chemist scratch their head. Historians still argue whether the efficacy of some of these ancient concoctions was due to their actual chemical properties, or simply the placebo effect. Coupled with a strong desire not to offend the nose of an emperor, the demand for wasn't merely a whim. It was deeply intertwined with health beliefs of the time. The concept of qi, pronounced qi, or vital life force, influenced everything, including personal well-being. A clean body, a clear mind, a balanced spirit, these were all interconnected. So, a scratchy beard, an unpleasant breath, or body odor wasn't just socially awkward. It could be seen as a sign of internal imbalance. The meticulous preparation of these toiletries often involved rare herbs, precious oils, and even, in some cases, rather exotic animal products. You might find a recipe calling for ground pearls for a glowing complexion, or crushed deer antlers for a rejuvenating bath. And yes, sometimes the ingredients were just a tad unsettling. We're talking about a time when innovation often meant experimentation, and not all experiments were, shall we say, fragrant successes. But the overarching theme was clear. The imperial standard for personal presentation was incredibly high, and it set a precedent that permeated society. Even if you couldn't afford ground pearls, you'd find a cheaper, local alternative, aspiring to that same elusive glow. It was a golden age for the ancient equivalent of the beauty industry, driven by the exacting demands of the very top. So, you've got this picture in your mind of the Ming court, obsessed with looking and smelling their best, setting the bar high for everyone else. And what's the absolute foundation of all this personal presentation, you ask? Why, soap, of course, or rather, the Ming dynasty's ingenious, often earthy, interpretations of it. Forget the bubbly, rose-scented bars you might pick up today. Back then, cleansing was a far more organic, and sometimes surprisingly effective, affair. You wouldn't just be washing away the day's grime. You'd be engaging in a bit of ancient chemistry, concocting a concoction that served a similar purpose to our modern detergents. The most basic form of cleanser would have been plant ashes, specifically from woods like willow or mulberry. When mixed with water, these ashes created a mild alkaline solution, excellent for cutting through grease and dirt. Imagine scooping up a handful of fine ash, feeling its gritty texture, then mixing it with water to form a rough paste. It wouldn't lather like your shower gel, but you'd feel it working, slowly emulsifying the oils on your skin and hair. This was the Evremond soap, simple, effective, and readily available. But for those with a bit more coin, or living in the more refined urban centers, things got a lot more interesting, and definitely a lot more aromatic. Enter the world of soap beans or soap balls, which were anything but mundane. These were ingenious little marvels, crafted from a combination of ingredients that read like a forgotten recipe from an alchemist's pantry. Typically, they were made from the pulverized seeds of plants like the Chinese honey locust Bladitsia, sinensis or soapberry, Sapindus, mucoracea, both of which naturally contain saponins compounds that create a soapy lather when agitated with water. To these natural detergents, the Ming artisans would add an array of exquisite ingredients, ground up fragrant flowers like jasmine or orchid, delicate essential oils extracted from herbs, and sometimes, surprisingly, even things like pearl powder, for a supposed brightening effect. Think about holding one of these in your hand. It wouldn't feel like a hard bar of soap, perhaps a softer, more pliable ball, releasing subtle, earthy, floral scents as you worked it into a lather. It was a sensory experience, a daily ritual that elevated the act of washing beyond mere necessity. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of these natural saponin-rich plants truly contributed to better public health outcomes in the Ming dynasty compared to earlier periods. While they certainly aided personal cleanliness, the full understanding of germ theory was centuries away, so the actual sanitizing effect was, by modern standards, limited. Yet, you can imagine the sheer delight and perceived cleanliness from using such a fragrant concoction. It wasn't just about removing dirt, it was about the ritual, the pleasant aroma, and the feeling of luxury, even if you were just scrubbing a few layers of dust off after a long day in the marketplace. The common people, on the other hand, had to be a bit more resourceful. While the imperial court enjoyed their infused soap beans, a peasant might have relied on rough loofah gourds for scrubbing and simple ashes or even plain river water. It's a stark reminder of the social stratification, even in something as fundamental as getting clean. But even for the less privileged, there was still an emphasis on basic hygiene, perhaps driven more by necessity and the practical discomfort of being perpetually unwashed, rather than by any grand imperial decree on fragrant cleanliness. And let's be honest, who really wants to share a tight space with someone who hasn't had a good wash in a while? Even in the Ming Dynasty, personal space was a luxury, and a pleasant smell was a welcome bonus. It's like when you're stuck on a crowded subway train today. You really appreciate it when everyone has at least attempted some form of personal freshness. The Ming citizens were no different in that regard, just with different tools at their disposal. With your body feeling, shall we say, ash-tinged clean from the previous section's discussion of ancient soaps. Let's now turn our attention to the crowning glory, the hair. In the Ming Dynasty, your hair wasn't just hair. It was a canvas, a statement of status, and an intricate project requiring dedication and a surprisingly diverse range of products. You might think of it as a low-maintenance era, but oh, how wrong you'd be. The hair care rituals were elaborate, time-consuming, and utterly fascinating. For starters, let's talk about the hair itself. Long, dark, and meticulously cared for was the ideal for both men and women, though the styles differed significantly. Men often wore their hair long and gathered into a top knot, sometimes covered by an elaborate cap, signifying their scholarly or official status. Women, on the other hand, had truly architectural hairstyles, often built up with frameworks and adorned with exquisite pins, combs, and sometimes even fresh flowers. Imagine the sheer weight of some of these contraptions, let alone the time it took to assemble them each day. It wasn't a quick bun and go. It was a commitment to keep these elaborate styles in place and the hair healthy. A range of concoctions were employed. For cleansing, similar to the body, natural saponin-rich plants were used. Rice water, left to ferment slightly, was also a popular rinse, believed to add shine and strength. You'd probably find yourself squatting by a basin, patiently pouring cloudy rice water over your head, feeling the subtle stickiness before rinsing it clean. It certainly wasn't the instant lather of a modern shampoo. But beyond basic cleansing, the Ming people used a variety of treatments for conditioning and aesthetics. Oils, often infused with fragrant herbs like cassia or jasmine, were massaged into the scalp to promote growth and add luster. Imagine the earthy, sweet scent of these oils warming on your head, perhaps followed by a vigorous brushing to distribute them evenly. One particularly quirky tidbit involves the use of pig fat. Yes, you heard that right. While more delicate oils were preferred by the wealthy, for those needing something more robust to condition coarse hair or to help hold intricate styles, rendered pig fat, often mixed with fragrant herbs to mask its original aroma, served as a surprisingly effective pomade. You'd be carefully applying a dollop of this, perhaps feeling a slight chill as it touched your scalp, then working it through your strands. It sounds less than glamorous to our modern ears, but remember, this was a time of resourcefulness, and if it got the job done and kept your top knot looking respectable, it was a perfectly acceptable solution. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of animal fats in hair care contributed to certain scalp conditions or actually provided a protective barrier against environmental damage. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, depending on the individual and the specific blend. Beyond conditioning, there was also the matter of keeping the hair free of pests. Lice, unfortunately, were a common nuisance across all social strata. To combat this, people used fine-toothed combs, often made of bamboo or wood, and applied concoctions containing strong-smelling herbs or even mineral compounds to deter the little creatures. Imagine the meticulous, perhaps slightly itchy, process of combing through your long hair, hoping to dislodge any unwelcome guests. It's a far cry from a modern medicated shampoo. But in the absence of chemical solutions, natural deterrents and diligent grooming were the best defense. The artistry of Ming Dynasty hairdressing truly comes alive when you consider the accessories. Elaborate hairpins crafted from gold, silver, jade, or even kingfisher feathers, a highly prized and sometimes controversial material due to the method of obtaining the feathers, were not just decorative. They were structural components, holding those gravity-defying styles in place. So, as you drift off, picture the Ming lady, sitting patiently as her maid meticulously braids, twists, and pins her hair into an exquisite sculpture, carefully applying fragrant oils and perhaps a touch of pig fat, ensuring every strand is perfectly in place for the day, or perhaps for a very long night of sleep, hoping it all holds until morning. It was a true commitment to follicular excellence. Having meticulously styled our Ming Dynasty hair, let's now descend to another crucial aspect of personal hygiene, one that perhaps brings us closest to the intimate reality of daily life: dental delights and dilemmas. You might wince at the thought of ancient dentistry, but the Ming people, like many before and after them, understood the importance of a clean mouth, even if their methods were, by modern standards, a bit rustic. This wasn't just about fresh breath. It was about preventing decay, maintaining overall health, and perhaps avoiding social embarrassment when speaking to someone of higher status. The most common tool for oral hygiene would have been something akin to a chewing stick or a simple brush made from twigs. Willow twigs, in particular, were favored for their slightly bitter taste and the fine fibers that emerged when chewed or pounded, creating a rudimentary bristle. Imagine yourself, first thing in the morning, taking a fresh twig, perhaps from a nearby willow tree, and patiently chewing on one end until the fibers splayed out. This natural brush would then be used to scrub the teeth, gently, or perhaps not so gently, removing food particles. It was an entirely manual, very hands-on process, completely devoid of minty freshness or electric vibrations. But beyond the simple stick, there was also the use of tooth powders. These weren't manufactured in gleaming factories. They were carefully ground by hand, often from a mix of surprising ingredients. You'd find recipes calling for things like dried herbs, mint, ginger, and even ginseng were popular, fine salt, and sometimes, incredibly, crushed animal bones, or even powdered deer antlers believed to strengthen teeth and gums. Imagine the texture of such a powder on your tongue, gritty and earthy, before you used your twig brush to work it around your mouth. It might have tasted more like a savory concoction than a refreshing mint, but the abrasive quality would have certainly helped to scour away plaque. One quirky tidbit about Ming dental care involves the use of charcoal. Yes, the very same stuff you might use for a barbecue, but in finely powdered form. Charcoal is known for its absorbent properties, and it was used to help whiten teeth and absorb bad odors. So, you might have found yourself, after a particularly pungent meal, reaching for a small pot of black charcoal powder, dipping your twig into it, and then scrubbing away. The immediate visual effect, of course, would have been teeth stained black with charcoal, quickly followed by a rinse to reveal, hopefully, a brighter smile. Historians still argue whether the consistent use of abrasive tooth powders, especially those with harder mineral components, caused long-term damage to tooth enamel, or if the benefits of cleaning outweighed the potential for wear. It's a debate that highlights the constant tension between ancient remedies and modern understanding. Bad breath, or halitosis, was just as much a concern then as it is now. To combat this, people would chew on aromatic spices like cloves, fennel seeds, or cardamom pods. Imagine the intense burst of flavor as you popped a clove into your mouth after a garlicky meal, hoping its strong aroma would overpower any lingering scent. It was a natural, readily available solution, perhaps not as long-lasting as modern mouthwash, but certainly effective in the short term. For those who could afford it, small silver or jade tongue scrapers were also used to remove the white coating that can contribute to bad breath, showing a surprisingly advanced understanding of oral hygiene practices. So, while you might not have had a sparkling Hollywood smile in the Ming Dynasty, you certainly put in the effort to keep your mouth as clean and presentable as possible. It was a daily ritual, performed with whatever natural tools were at hand, all in the pursuit of pleasant breath and healthy teeth, even if those teeth were a bit grey from all that charcoal. With our breath now hopefully acceptable, let's turn our attention to the largest organ of the body, and one that required constant, meticulous attention in the Ming Dynasty, the skin's silken quest. You might imagine a world where people simply went about their day, exposed to the elements, their skin left to its own devices. But for the Ming elite, and even many commoners, achieving a smooth, clear, and often pale complexion was a significant endeavor, requiring an array of creams, oils, and even some rather unconventional pigments. It was a beauty standard deeply rooted in cultural ideals, where fair skin often signified a life of leisure, untouched by the harsh sun of manual labor. The pursuit of pale skin was paramount, particularly for women of the upper classes. Exposure to the sun was actively avoided, and umbrellas or wide-brimmed hats were common accessories, not just for protection from rain, but from the tanning rays of the sun. But beyond avoidance, there were active treatments. Rice powder, finely ground, was a staple. You'd apply it to your face and neck, perhaps with a soft puff, creating a visibly lighter layer that both evened out skin tone and absorbed excess oil. Imagine the delicate, almost imperceptible cloud of powder rising as you patted it onto your skin, aiming for that ethereal, almost translucent look. It was the ancient equivalent of a setting powder, but with a much more pronounced whitening effect. Beyond powders, a myriad of oils and creams were used for moisturizing and nourishing the skin. These were typically plant-based, extracted from seeds like sesame, almond, or sometimes more exotic flora. These oils would often be infused with fragrant herbs such as jasmine, rose, or chrysanthemum, both for their scent and their perceived skin-benefiting properties. You'd gently warm a small amount in your palms, feeling the smooth, silken texture, before massaging it into your face and hands. The sensation would be one of richness and luxury, slowly absorbing to leave a soft, supple feel without the lingering greasy residue that might come from more rudimentary concoctions. One particularly quirky or fringe tidbit in the pursuit of Clear skin involved the use of ground pearls. Yes, actual pearls, pulverized into a fine powder, were highly prized ingredients in topical creams and ingestible remedies. The belief was that the calcium and other minerals in pearls would purify the skin, reduce blemishes, and even promote longevity. Imagine the effort involved in grinding these precious gems into a usable powder, the pearlescent dust shimmering under the lamplight. It was an extravagant, almost mythical ingredient, reserved for the truly wealthy, signifying not just a desire for beauty, but immense status. Historians still argue whether the purported skin-brightening effects of pearl powder were due to actual chemical reactions or simply the subtle reflective properties of the finely ground particles, creating an illusion of luminosity. Regardless, it was a highly coveted ingredient for blemishes and skin imperfections. Herbal poultices and specialized ointments were applied. Ingredients like turmeric, known for its anti-inflammatory properties, or various plant extracts, were blended into pastes and dabbed onto problem areas. You might find yourself carefully applying a yellowish paste to a troublesome spot, hoping its natural properties would work their magic overnight. It was a holistic approach, drawing heavily on traditional Chinese medicine principles, where skin issues were often seen as outward manifestations of internal imbalances. So, your quest for smooth, glowing skin in the Ming Dynasty wasn't just about surface aesthetics. It was a deeply ingrained cultural practice, a blend of traditional knowledge, natural ingredients, and a touch of extravagant luxury, all designed to make your skin as silken and luminous as possible, even if it meant rubbing ground pearls all over your face. Having indulged in the pursuit of luminous skin, let's now waft into the equally important, yet perhaps more ephemeral, realm of perfume's fading whispers. In the Ming Dynasty, personal scent was more than just a pleasant accessory. It was a subtle communication, a marker of status, and often a necessary tool to mask the less delightful aromas of a pre-industrial world. You wouldn't find bottles of mass-produced eau de toilette on every vanity. Instead, you'd encounter a world of carefully crafted, natural fragrances designed to linger subtly, then fade. Much like a whispered secret, the primary goal of personal fragrance was often to counteract or conceal the general odors of daily life. Picture yourself navigating crowded streets, or even walking through a busy market. The air would be thick with the smells of cooking, animals, unwashed bodies, and sometimes less savory effluvia. A delicate personal fragrance, therefore, was not just a luxury but a strategic deployment of pleasantries. The sources of these aromas were almost entirely natural, extracted from a bounty of fragrant plants and resins. Incense was a fundamental element, not just for religious ceremonies, but for personal scenting and perfuming clothes. You might have a small, intricately carved incense burner in your chambers, gently releasing wisps of smoke infused with sandalwood, agarwood, or musk. Imagine the subtle, woody, and slightly sweet scent clinging to your robes as you dressed, a passive form of perfumery that enveloped you in a delicate aura. Beyond burning, these fragrant woods and resins were often ground into powders and sewn into small sachets that could be tucked into clothing, placed in bed linens, or even carried on one's person. You'd catch a gentle whiff of spices and wood whenever you moved, a subtle reminder of your presence. For direct application to the skin, fragrant oils and pomades were used. These were typically plant-based oils, like those used for skincare, but heavily infused with highly aromatic flowers and herbs. Jasmine, roses, orchids, and osmanthus flowers were highly prized. The flowers would often be steeped in the oil for extended periods, allowing their delicate scents to permeate the base. You'd dab a small amount behind your ears, on your wrists, or along your collarbone, feeling the cool, slick texture of the oil and inhaling its rich, natural bouquet. This wasn't a powerful, room-filling scent. It was designed for intimacy, for those who came close to you. One particularly quirky or fringe tidbit involves the use of musk, derived from the musk deer. While highly valued for its intense and long-lasting scent, its procurement involved hunting the deer, which would eventually lead to conservation concerns centuries later. In the Ming dynasty, however, it was a prized, exotic ingredient, often mixed with floral oils to give them depth and staying power. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of animal-derived musks and civets in ancient perfumes truly contributed to the social stratification of scent, with the most potent and long-lasting fragrances reserved exclusively for the elite. It's likely that the sheer cost made them inaccessible to the common person, making a strong, complex perfume a clear indicator of wealth and status. Beyond personal application, the Ming people also understood the art of perfuming their rooms would be fumigated with aromatic smoke, and even paper and writing implements could be scented. You might reach for a letter and catch the faint, sweet scent of plum blossom, a subtle detail that enhanced the experience. So, as you drift deeper into slumber, picture the Ming lady or gentleman surrounded by the subtle, natural perfumes of their era. The quiet burn of sandalwood, the gentle waft of jasmine from an oiled wrist, and the lingering scent of fragrant sachets in their silken robes, all designed to make their presence known delicately through a fading whisper of scent. With a delicate scent now adorning our Ming dynasty persona, let's pivot to the world of color and artistry that adorned the face itself. Cosmetic curiosities unveiled. You might assume that historical makeup was simple, perhaps a dash of rouge and nothing more. But the Ming dynasty saw a surprisingly sophisticated, and at times wonderfully elaborate, approach to facial aesthetics, often influenced by theatrical traditions and evolving beauty standards. This wasn't about hiding flaws as much as it was about enhancing features and expressing an ideal of beauty. The foundation, as we discussed, often involved white rice powder or similar light-colored powders to achieve that coveted pale complexion. But once the canvas was prepared, the real artistry began. One of the most prominent features to be emphasized was the eyebrows. Oh, the eyebrows. These were not merely left to their natural shape. They were meticulously groomed, plucked, and often completely redrawn. You'd spend time carefully shaping them, perhaps using tweezers made of bronze or even tiny silk threads to remove stray hairs. For coloring the eyebrows, various pigments were used, most notably ink made from mineral dyes or burnt willow twigs. Imagine carefully mixing a small amount of black mineral pigment with water, creating a fine paste, and then using a delicate brush, perhaps one made from rabbit hair, to draw thin, arching lines. The popular styles for eyebrows changed over time, from broader, more natural shapes to slender, highly arched moth eyebrows or willow leaf eyebrows. These weren't just lines, they were expressions of current fashion, subtly altering the entire look of the face. You'd carefully outline and fill them in, ensuring perfect symmetry, a task that required a steady hand and a keen eye. Next, let's talk about the lips. The ideal lip shape was often small and cherry-like. To achieve this, women would apply lip rouge, typically made from cinnabar, a mercury sulfide mineral, which, yes, contained mercury, but more on that in a moment, or from the petals of flowers. Like safflower, the color would range from deep reds to softer pinks. Instead of applying it to the entire lip, often only the center of the lips would be colored, creating an illusion of a smaller, more delicate mouth. You'd carefully dab the color, perhaps using a tiny brush, or even your fingertip blending it just so, aiming for that perfect, demure pout. The use of cinnabar, while providing a vibrant red, introduces a fascinating and somewhat alarming historical detail. The potential for toxicity. One particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is the historical use of lead-based white powder for the face, alongside cinnabar for lips and cheeks. While not exclusively Ming, it was certainly part of the broader historical palette. The desire for extreme pallor sometimes outweighed the understanding of long-term health effects. Historians still argue whether the cumulative exposure to heavy metals from cosmetics significantly impacted the health and longevity of aristocratic women in the Ming dynasty. While there's no definitive large-scale study, it's a sobering thought that beauty often came with a hidden cost. For the cheeks, a lighter application of rouge, also derived from safflower, or sometimes even finely ground red earth pigments, would be used to add a flush of color, signifying health and vitality. You'd lightly dust it onto the apples of your cheeks, blending it gently to avoid harsh lines, aiming for a natural glow rather than a painted look. Sometimes, small, decorative motifs, like plum blossoms or butterflies, known as Hue Dion, would be painted onto the forehead or temples using special pigments, adding an extra touch of elegance and artistic expression, especially for festive occasions. So, as you drift off, imagine the Ming beauty, seated before her bronze mirror, painstakingly crafting her visage with powders, brushes, and pigments, transforming her features with skill and artistry, unveiling the curious cosmetics of an era gone by. With our Ming dynasty face now artfully enhanced with powders, sculpted eyebrows, and subtly rouged lips, let's direct our attention to a surprisingly intricate detail that spoke volumes about a person's status and aesthetic refinement. Nail care's subtle statements. You might picture long, untended nails as the norm in ancient times. But in the Ming dynasty, particularly among the wealthy, nails were meticulously maintained, shaped, and often adorned, serving as quiet indicators of leisure and prestige. This wasn't about practicality. It was about presenting an image of elegance and refinement, subtly communicating that you didn't engage in manual labor. For the elite, especially women, very long, well-kept nails were a sign of beauty and status. This wasn't just a casual grow-out. It involved careful filing, shaping, and protection. Think about the dedication required to maintain nails that could grow to several inches, sometimes even curving elegantly. To prevent breakage and provide support, elaborate nail guards were commonly used. These were exquisite, often curved casings made from precious metals like gold or silver, or materials like jade, ivory, and even tortoiseshell, sometimes intricately engraved or inlaid with gemstones. Imagine slipping one of these delicate, sculpted guards over your finger, feeling its cool smoothness against your nail, protecting it from everyday bumps and snags. They were both functional and immensely decorative, miniature works of art that adorned the fingertips. Beyond protection, the nails were also given color. The most popular method for coloring nails involved the use of henna, or more specifically, the juice from the impatiens flower, also known as touch-me-not or balsam. The petals of these flowers, often mixed with alum to enhance the color, would be crushed into a paste and applied directly to the nails. You'd carefully daub the sticky, vibrant paste onto your fingernails, perhaps wrapping them in cloth overnight to allow the dye to set. The result would be a deep reddish-orange stain that would last for days, slowly fading over time. It was a natural, semi-permanent way to add a touch of color, transforming plain nails into subtle statements. One particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is the belief that the length and condition of a woman's nails could reflect her virtue and gentility. Short, broken nails might suggest a life of hard labor, which was considered less desirable for women of higher social standing. Thus, maintaining long, pristine nails was not just a fashion choice, but a cultural expectation. Historians still argue whether the extreme length of some aristocratic Ming nails genuinely impeded daily activities, or if they were largely symbolic, with tasks requiring dexterity often relegated to servants. It's likely a bit of both. Certain activities would undoubtedly be hampered, further emphasizing the wearer's elevated status. For hygiene, fine-toothed combs and small, delicate implements were used to clean beneath the nails, ensuring no dirt marred their pristine appearance. The process of nail care would have been a daily ritual, performed perhaps by a maid or with meticulous self-care, involving careful trimming, if any, filing with abrasive stones or finer tools, and the regular application of coloring pastes. So, as you drift deeper, picture the elegant hand of a Ming lady, adorned not with rings, but with slender, curving nail guards gleaming in the lamplight, protecting nails stained a deep, earthy red, each one a testament to patience, refinement, and a silent, yet striking, statement of wealth and idleness in a world where such details spoke volumes. With our Ming Dynasty nails now perfectly adorned, let's immerse ourselves fully in the act of cleansing itself, exploring bathing's bold beginnings. You might envision grand communal bathhouses, like those of ancient Rome, but the reality in Ming China was often more varied, reflecting both practical limitations and evolving cultural norms around water, privacy, and personal cleanliness. Bathing wasn't always a daily luxury for everyone, but its importance, both for hygiene and spiritual well-being, was undeniable. For the vast majority of the population, access to large quantities of warm, clean water for a full immersion bath was a significant challenge. Rivers, lakes, and wells were the primary sources, and carrying water, heating it, and disposing of it were all laborious tasks. Thus, for many, daily cleanliness often involves sponge baths or quick rinses using a basin and a damp cloth. Imagine performing this routine in a small, perhaps chilly, chamber, carefully washing sections of your body, conserving precious water. It was efficient, practical, and a necessary ritual to remove the day's accumulated dust and grime. You'd feel the cool, damp cloth against your skin, a quick refresh before donning clean garments. However, for the wealthy and within the imperial court, bathing could be a far more elaborate affair. While not always daily, full baths were certainly indulged in. Private bath chambers, often equipped with large wooden tubs, would be prepared. Servants would diligently haul and heat water, sometimes infusing it with aromatic herbs or flowers like chrysanthemum or cassia to create a soothing, fragrant experience. Imagine sinking into a large wooden tub filled with warm, steaming water, the subtle scent of herbs rising around you. It was a moment of true relaxation and luxury, a stark contrast to the quick rinses of the common folk. A mainstream historical fact is that while full immersion baths were less frequent for the general populace, the concept of cleanliness was still highly valued. It was often linked to health and spiritual purity. Scholars and officials would perform ritualistic washings before important ceremonies or examinations, emphasizing the connection between a clean body and a clear, respectful mind. This wasn't just about physical dirt. It was about preparing oneself mentally and spiritually. One particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is the use of perfumed or herbal steam for cleansing and rejuvenation. Rather than simply immersing in water, some might have opted for a form of ancient sauna, where fragrant herbs were placed over hot coals or in steaming water, and the individual would sit nearby, allowing the scented vapor to cleanse their skin and respiratory passages. Imagine the warm, humid air infused with the scent of mugwort or ginger, enveloping you, opening your pores, and making you feel both refreshed and deeply relaxed. Historians still argue whether the perceived health benefits of these herbal steams were primarily psychosomatic, or if the inhalation of certain volatile compounds genuinely offered therapeutic effects for respiratory or skin ailments. It's a fascinating blend of traditional medicine and self-care. Public bathhouses, while perhaps not as ubiquitous as in some other cultures, did exist in larger cities, serving as social hubs, as well as places for cleansing. Here, you'd find people sharing large basins or using individual tubs, engaging in conversation while they scrubbed away the day. The experience would have been noisy, communal, and a far cry from the private serenity of an imperial bath. So, as you drift off into sleep, picture the various ways people sought cleanliness in the Ming dynasty, from the simple basin and cloth in a humble dwelling to the luxurious, herb-infused wooden tub in a noble's chamber. Each act of bathing, however grand or modest, a deliberate step in maintaining one's presence in a world often teeming with odors. Having soaked in the historical nuances of Ming dynasty bathing, let's now address an inevitable, yet often overlooked, aspect of daily life: the ongoing battle against less than pleasant personal aromas. Yes, we're talking about deodorants. Desperate measures. You might assume that without modern antiperspirants, people simply lived with body odor. And while that was certainly more prevalent than today, the Ming Chinese, particularly the elite, employed various ingenious, if sometimes crude, methods to combat and mask unwanted smells, aiming for a more agreeable personal atmosphere. The primary cause of body odor, as we understand it now, is bacterial breakdown of sweat. While the Ming people didn't grasp the microscopic world of bacteria, they certainly recognized the effect. Their solutions, therefore, focused on either absorbing moisture, perfuming the body, or using ingredients believed to have purifying properties. One of the simplest and most widespread methods for managing sweat and odor was the use of powders. As we touched upon with facial care, finely ground rice powder was a staple. But for the body, other absorbent powders might be used, sometimes mixed with fragrant herbs like dried patchouli or cassia bark. Imagine dusting your underarms or other prone areas with a fine, slightly earthy scented powder, feeling it absorb moisture and provide a temporary barrier against stickiness. It wasn't an antiperspirant, but it certainly helped with the feeling of dampness and could provide a subtle, pleasant aroma. You'd apply it diligently, hoping for a few hours of relative freshness. A mainstream, historical fact is the significant use of aromatic sachets and perfumed garments as a primary line of defense against body odor, rather than directly applying something to the skin like a modern roll-on. The approach was often to surround oneself with pleasant scents. Small silk pouches filled with dried fragrant herbs, spices like cloves or cinnamon, and even small pieces of scented wood like sandalwood or agar wood would be sewn into clothing, tucked into sleeves, or simply carried in a pocket. As you moved, these sachets would release their scent, creating a personal cloud of pleasantness. Imagine the subtle rustle of your robes, releasing a puff of clove-scented air as you gestured, a constant, low-level effort to mask any less desirable odors. One particularly quirky or fringe tidbit involves the use of certain plant extracts believed to have odor-neutralizing properties, sometimes applied as crude pastes or washes. For instance, some texts refer to the use of specific barks or roots that, when boiled and used as a wash, were thought to reduce perspiration or strong odors. While the scientific basis might be dubious by modern standards, the effort shows a persistent desire to control personal scent. Historians still argue whether the effectiveness of these ancient deodorants was more about masking odors with strong fragrances, or if some of the herbal components truly possessed mild antibacterial or astringent properties that offered genuine relief from body odor. It's a tricky question, as sensory experiences are hard to reconstruct across centuries. Ultimately, the Ming Dynasty's approach to body odor was a multifaceted one. Absorb moisture with powders, mask unpleasant smells with strong, natural perfumes, and perhaps, occasionally, try a more experimental herbal wash. There were no quick fixes, no magical sprays. It was a daily, conscious effort to maintain a semblance of freshness in a world that often lacked modern sanitation and ventilation. So, as you drift into deeper slumber, picture the resourceful Ming citizen, armed with fragrant sachets and earthy powders, making their desperate, yet often charming, attempts to conquer the invisible enemy of unpleasant odors, ensuring their personal aura was as agreeable as possible in a bustling, fragrant world. Having addressed the general issue of body odor, let's zoom in on a specific and very direct concern: oral fresheners and breath. You might have already considered the twig brushes and tooth powders from earlier, but beyond basic cleaning, the Ming Dynasty also had a particular interest in ensuring that when you opened your mouth to speak, a pleasant aroma, or at least a neutral one, emanated forth. This wasn't just about politeness. In a society where oral communication was paramount, bad breath could be a serious social handicap. The understanding of what caused bad breath was, of course, rudimentary by modern scientific standards. They didn't know about anaerobic bacteria feasting on food particles. Instead, they often attributed it to dietary imbalances, internal heat, or simply lingering food odors. Their solutions, therefore, focused on either masking the smell or providing a mild cleansing action to remove superficial residues, the most straightforward and widely available method for instant breath freshening was the chewing of aromatic spices and herbs. Cloves were immensely popular, and for good reason. Their strong, pungent, and slightly sweet aroma could quickly overpower many other smells. You'd pop a whole clove into your mouth, feeling its initial sharp taste, then the slow release of its intense fragrance as you chewed. Other common choices included fennel seeds, cardamom pods, and even small pieces of dried ginger or citrus peel. Imagine the burst of flavor as you chewed on a handful of these, hoping to banish the lingering scent of that morning's garlic and fermented bean curd. It was a natural, readily available, and surprisingly effective way to provide a quick olfactory reset for your breath. Beyond chewing, there were also various forms of mouth rinses. These weren't the brightly colored, antiseptic liquids we use today. Instead, They were typically infusions made from boiled herbs or teas. Green tea, known for its mild astringent properties, was sometimes used as a simple rinse. More elaborate concoctions might involve boiling fragrant herbs like mint, chrysanthemum, or even a dilute solution of vinegar in water. You'd swish this liquid around your mouth after a meal, feeling the mild cleansing sensation and enjoying the subtle, natural aroma it left behind. It was a more refined approach than just chewing spices, suggesting a greater emphasis on sustained freshness. One particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is the belief that certain fragrant wood chips, when gently chewed or kept in the mouth, could impart a pleasant aroma. Small slivers of sandalwood or agar wood, while primarily used for incense, might occasionally be held in the mouth or gently sucked upon to release their delicate, woody fragrance. It's an expensive way to freshen your breath, certainly, but for the truly discerning, it offered a unique and subtle alternative to pungent spices. Historians still argue whether the primary benefit of these oral fresheners was truly antiseptic, reducing bacteria, or simply a powerful masking effect. Given the ingredients, it was likely a combination of both, with the aromatic compounds doing much of the heavy lifting in terms of perception for those of higher status. Maintaining fresh breath was a constant social imperative. You wouldn't want to inadvertently offend a superior or a potential suitor with an unfortunate lingering odor. So, you'd carry a small pouch with your preferred chewing spices, or have a servant prepare a fresh herbal rinse as needed. It was a subtle, yet crucial, part of personal presentation, ensuring that every interaction, even a close conversation, remained pleasant and respectful. As you drift further into dreams, envision the Ming scholar, perhaps before an important meeting, discreetly popping a clove into his mouth, ensuring his words, as well as his breath, were perfectly composed. Having meticulously attended to our Ming dynasty breath, let's now consider a demographic whose hygiene often presents unique challenges across all historical periods. Childhood hygiene's oddities. You might imagine a simpler approach to children's cleanliness, perhaps less rigorous than for adults. But in the Ming dynasty, while methods differed, keeping children clean and healthy was paramount, often involving practices that seem peculiar to our modern sensibilities, blending practicality with superstition. Infants and young children were, of course, a constant source of delightful yet messy moments. Without disposable diapers or easily accessible washing machines, managing excretions was a daily hands-on task. Babies were often swaddled, but when it came to changing, the approach was typically immediate cleaning with warm water and soft cloths. For infants, especially, a common practice was the use of open-crotch trousers, allowing for easy cleanup without constant changing of full garments. You'd imagine a parent quickly rinsing the affected area, perhaps using a mild herbal wash, and then drying thoroughly to prevent chafing. It was a pragmatic solution in a world without modern conveniences. Bathing for children, especially infants, was a delicate affair. The water would be carefully warmed, and often specific herbs were added to the bathwater. Herbs like mugwort, known for its purported antiseptic and calming properties, or ginger for warmth and circulation, were commonly used. Imagine the parent gently lowering a small child into a wooden basin filled with warm, slightly fragrant water, carefully washing their delicate skin. The belief was that these herbal baths not only cleansed, but also protected the child from illness and evil spirits, blending hygiene with traditional medicinal practices. A mainstream historical fact is the high infant and child mortality rates. During the Ming Dynasty, which unfortunately meant that hygiene practices, while important, were battling against a host of other factors like poor nutrition, lack of vaccinations, and rudimentary medical understanding. This elevated the importance of preventative measures, however superstitious some might seem now. Parents would go to great lengths to ensure their children were clean, not just for comfort, but out of a deep-seated desire for their survival and well-being. One particularly quirky or fringe tidbit revolves around the use of small, elaborate scent bags or amulets worn by children. These weren't just for good luck. They often contained potent, aromatic herbs believed to ward off illness, and, by extension, unpleasant odors. You'd see a child with a beautifully embroidered silk pouch tied to their clothing, filled with things like realga and arsenic sulfide, mineral, surprisingly, cinnabar, or other strong-smelling but the thinking was that the strong smell would deter flies and other insects, and perhaps even evil spirits thought to carry disease. Historians still argue whether the perceived benefits of these strong-smelling amulets were genuinely prophylactic, or primarily symbolic, offering psychological comfort to parents in an era of precarious childhood health. It's a fascinating glimpse into the blend of practical hygiene and protective folklore. Hair care for children was also distinctive. Young children often had their heads shaved or their hair kept very short, partly for ease of cleaning and partly due to cultural beliefs about hair growth. As they grew older, girls' hair would be carefully braided and boys' hair might be tied up, often with simpler versions of the adult adornments. Imagine the daily routine of washing a child's short hair, perhaps with plain rice water, and then quickly drying it in the sun. It was about practicality and managing potential issues like lice, which, unfortunately, were a persistent challenge across all ages. So, as you drift into a deeper sleep, picture the Ming parent diligently caring for their child, using ancient remedies and practical solutions, hoping that clean skin, sweet scents, and a touch of ancient magic would ensure their little ones' health and happiness in a world where childhood hygiene was a constant, devoted endeavor. With the young ones now tucked away, let's consider a practical challenge that bridges the gap between the comforts of home and the rigors of the road. Travel toiletry kits. You might imagine Ming Dynasty travelers simply roughing it, but even on journeys, maintaining a degree of personal hygiene was important, not just for comfort, but for social presentation. Without a convenient hotel, gift shop, or a CVS to pop into, every essential had to be carefully considered and packed, often in compact, ingenious ways. Imagine yourself, a Ming merchant or official, preparing for a long journey. Whether traveling by horse, sedan, chair, or boat, space was always at a premium. Therefore, the toiletries you brought had to be practical, versatile, and ideally long-lasting. This wasn't a sprawling collection of potions. It was a carefully curated selection of vital implements and substances. The most fundamental item would have been a small, portable washing kit. This would typically include a small, perhaps collapsible, basin made of lacquered wood or sturdy fabric, and a few soft cloths. For cleansing, a traveler would likely carry a small pouch of dried soap beans or a block of pressed herbal ash. Imagine unfolding your compact basin by a riverbank, filling it with water, and diligently washing your face and hands after a dusty day on the road. It was about making the best of limited resources, finding moments of cleanliness wherever possible. For oral hygiene, the trusty willow twig brush would be an absolute essential, perhaps carried in a small protective case to keep its fibers clean. Alongside it, a small amount of tooth powder, likely a simple mix of salt and dried herbs, would be carefully wrapped in paper or stored in a tiny ceramic pot. You'd find yourself using this by the dim light of a roadside inn, diligently scrubbing away, hoping to keep your breath presentable for morning greetings. It was a no-frills approach, but effective enough for basic maintenance. A mainstream historical fact is that travelers would often carry small mints, personal incense burners, or sachets to combat the often unpleasant smells encountered during travel, such as crowded inns, animal stables, or bustling markets. These weren't just for religious purposes. They were portable air fresheners. Imagine lighting a tiny stick of sandalwood incense in your cramped lodging, allowing its delicate smoke to dispel the stale odors. Or simply having a fragrant sachet tucked into your belt, subtly releasing its scent as you moved through a particularly malodorous town. It was a passive, yet persistent, effort to create a more agreeable personal environment. One particularly quirky or fringe tidbit involves the use of specialized, very compact travel cakes of cosmetics. For women, these might be tiny, highly compressed discs of rice powder or rouge, sometimes designed to be dissolved slightly with water for application. Instead of carrying bulky pots, you'd have these ingenious little solid forms, carefully protected in small, decorative boxes. Historians still argue whether the robustness and longevity of these compact travel cosmetics truly lived up to their creators' claims, or if they often crumbled and became unusable after a few bumpy days on the road. The ingenuity was certainly there, even if the practicality might have been hit or miss. Finally, for hair, a simple wooden comb was indispensable, along with perhaps a small vial of scented oil to tame and condition. You'd carefully comb out the dust and tangles accumulated from a day's journey, applying a few drops of oil to add a hint of fragrance and shine. It was about making oneself presentable, even when far from the comforts of home. So, as you drift into deeper slumber, picture the resourceful Ming traveler, opening their modest pouch of toiletries, a small collection of practical wonders designed to bring a touch of cleanliness and personal dignity to even the most arduous journey, ensuring that even on the road, one could maintain a semblance of civilized grace. Having seen the careful preparation of a Ming Dynasty travel kit, let's now plunge into a considerably grittier reality: the soldiers' gritty grooming. You might assume that on campaign, personal hygiene would be the absolute last priority, a luxury utterly discarded in the face of survival. And while modern standards of cleanliness were certainly non-existent, even the Ming soldier, whether guarding a city wall or marching across vast landscapes, had some rudimentary practices to maintain health and morale, however basic they might seem to us. This wasn't about looking good. It was about preventing disease, staying functional, and enduring the harshness of military life. Life as a Ming soldier was incredibly tough. Days were filled with arduous drills, long marches, and the constant threat of conflict. Water was often scarce, and what was available might not always be clean. Disease spread rapidly in crowded camps, making even basic hygiene crucial for preventing epidemics that could decimate an army more effectively than any enemy blade. The most fundamental form of cleansing for a soldier would have been opportunistic, washing in rivers or streams whenever available. Imagine stripping down to wash off the sweat, dust, and grime of a long march in the cold water of a mountain stream, feeling the biting chill but also the immense relief of being somewhat clean. Without soap, this was often just a rinse, but it was vital for removing surface dirt and cooling the body. When water was truly scarce, dry brushing or simply wiping down with a coarse cloth would be the only option. For their hair and beards, simplicity was key. Hair would be kept short or tied back tightly to prevent it from interfering with helmets or combat. Beards, if grown, were likely trimmed with basic knives. Lice, as you might imagine, were an ever-present menace in crowded military encampments. To combat this, soldiers would rely on constant combing with coarse wooden combs and, perhaps, the application of strong-smelling herbs or ashes to deter the pests. You'd probably witness a group of soldiers, in their downtime, meticulously combing through each other's hair. A communal act born of necessity to alleviate the incessant itching. A mainstream historical fact is that military doctors and apothecaries would often carry various herbs and rudimentary salves for treating skin irritations, minor wounds, and insect bites. While not strictly toiletries, these preparations were vital for maintaining a soldier's ability to fight and contributed to their overall physical well-being. The line between medicine and hygiene was often blurred, with remedies serving both purposes. One particularly quirky or fringe tidbit concerns the use of wood ash mixed with urine as a crude, last resort cleanser or disinfectant for wounds and skin conditions. While certainly unsavory to modern ears, the ammonia in urine has historical uses as a cleaning agent, and ash provides alkalinity. Imagine the desperation of using such a concoction in the field, prioritizing a raw form of antisepsis over pleasantries. Historians still argue whether the perceived benefits of these harsh field remedies outweighed the risks of infection or irritation, or if they were simply the best available options in desperate circumstances. It's a testament to human ingenuity in the face of extreme adversity. Oral hygiene for soldiers would be incredibly basic, chewing on twigs or rough herbs to freshen breath and clean teeth, or simply rinsing with water. There would be no time or resources for elaborate tooth powders. The focus was on preventing decay and pain that could incapacitate a soldier. So, as you drift further into the comfort of your bed, spare a thought for the Ming soldier, caked in dust and sweat, performing their rudimentary grooming rituals by the light of a flickering campfire or under the vast, uncaring sky, using whatever limited means were at their disposal to stay functional, healthy, and ready for whatever grim realities the next day might bring. Their gritty grooming was a testament to resilience, a far cry from the perfumed courts, but just as vital for survival. From the gritty realities of the soldier's camp, let's now transition to a more profound and perhaps unsettling final resting place for our discussion on toiletries, the afterlife's lasting layers. You might think that once a person passed away, their need for personal care ceased. But in the Ming Dynasty, as in many ancient cultures, the preparation of the body for burial and the inclusion of grave goods reflected a profound belief in the continuity of life, or at least the need for comfort and proper presentation in the world beyond. Even in death, the Ming people considered toiletries to play a significant role. The deceased were treated with immense respect, and the ritual of preparing the body was a solemn and meticulous affair. Before entombment, the body would undergo a thorough cleansing. This wasn't just symbolic. It was a practical measure, using water and sometimes aromatic herbal washes to purify the body for its journey. Imagine the quiet, reverent process of carefully washing the departed, perhaps with the same gentle strokes used in life, ensuring a final state of purity. This act of cleansing was believed to allow the soul to depart peacefully and cleanly, Following the wash, the body would often be dressed in fine burial shrouds, often made of silk or other luxurious fabrics. And just as in life, these garments might be infused with fragrant sachets or dusted with perfumed powders. These weren't just for pleasant aroma during the funeral rites. They were believed to accompany the deceased into the afterlife, ensuring they would carry a pleasant scent, suitable for interacting with ancestors or deities. You'd imagine the subtle, sweet scent of dried flowers and spices permeating the burial robes. A final touch of luxury for the eternal sleep. A mainstream historical fact is the practice of placing grave goods alongside the deceased. While these commonly included pottery, bronze vessels, and everyday tools, miniature or symbolic versions of toiletries were also frequently interred. These might be small cosmetic boxes, miniature combs, or even small containers of what were believed to be perfumed oils or powders. The idea was that the departed would continue their daily routines, even in the afterlife, and these items would provide comfort and ensure their proper appearance in the spiritual realm. You might find a delicate jade comb placed lovingly beside the deceased, ready for a spiritual morning groom. One particularly quirky or fringe tidbit involves the use of cinnabar for preservation and symbolism. While we touched on its use in cosmetics, cinnabar, a bright red mineral containing mercury, was also sometimes placed within or around the body during burial. Its vibrant red color was associated with vitality and immortality in Taoist beliefs, and it was also thought to have preservative properties. Imagine the striking red powder scattered over the body or placed in small packets, a final, bold splash of color in the quiet darkness of the tomb. Historians still argue whether the primary intention of using cinnabar in burial was its perceived mummifying effect or its symbolic power to ward off decay and usher the deceased into immortality. It's a fascinating blend of practical aspiration and deep spiritual belief. Even the oral cavity was sometimes attended to. While not always, there are historical accounts of fragrant herbs or small pearls being placed in the mouth of the deceased, further ensuring a pleasant essence even after death. These final touches, from the cleansing of the body to the inclusion of symbolic toiletries, speak volumes about the Ming dynasty's holistic view of life and death, where dignity, beauty, and comfort extended beyond the earthly realm into the mysterious journey to the afterlife. As you drift into the quiet depths of sleep, consider these lasting layers of care, a gentle whisper from the past, reminding us that even in eternity, the forgotten toiletries of the Ming dynasty continued their subtle, yet profound, presence. Now, as the stories of forgotten perfumes and gritty grooming begin to soften and blur at the edges of your mind, allow your own senses to gently recede. The echoes of Ming dynasty bathing rituals, the faint scent of long-ago jasmine, and the subtle whispers of ancient tooth powders are now fading, becoming distant ripples on the calm surface of your awareness. Feel the weight of your eyelids, growing heavier with each passing moment, a comforting blanket settling over your vision. The world outside, with its demands and its brightness, is slowly, surely, dissolving into the peaceful darkness. You've journeyed through centuries of personal care, from imperial palaces to dusty battlefields, and now your own journey leads you inward to a place of profound rest. Let every muscle in your body relax, releasing any lingering tension, any stray thought. Breathe slowly, deeply, each breath a gentle tide pulling you further away from wakefulness, closer to the embrace of sleep. There's nothing left to do, nowhere left to be, but here, now, drifting. Allow the final images of this historical slumber party to dissipate, leaving behind only a profound sense of calm. The past has receded, the present is fading, and all that remains is the soft, welcoming stillness of the night. Sweet dreams.